To start this off, I suppose what I'll do is talk about finding water first. You know, these reasons why we may need these water filters. So with that, I've got an article that I wrote. Let me see if I can get it here. I've got an article that I wrote over at Survivalist Prepper quite a few years ago. I need to actually update this a little bit. But this talks about some of the ideas for if say your water storage, you have your water storage and it runs out. Some ideas to maybe procure a little bit of water here or there. Now, granted, like I said, with all this stuff going on, especially the nuclear stuff, and who knows how much we should be concerned about that, I think it's important to have the water stored already. So that way you're not having to worry about, say, there's radioactive chemicals. There's, in low country water, you've got pesticides and herbicides and stuff like that. So with all of these things going on, I think it's important to have that water stored at home. You hear the rule of thumb all the time, 1 gallon of water per person per day. I kind of take that up to at least 2 gallons because I think you're going to use more than you actually, if you're super strict at rationing, then yes, 1 gallon of water per person per day is going to do it. But the odds of, using a little bit more here or there, or other people using more than they should, the odds of that are pretty good. So I would store more than that. My rule of thumb here with the two of us is 5 gallons of water a day. Just to, maybe that's a little overboard, maybe it's a little bit extra, maybe it's not. I don't know, but we try to store 5 gallons a day. Now, when you get up to a really large time frame, that's really hard to do. You think about 5 gallons a day for just a month, right? That's 150 gallons that you have to store. Depending on your situation, your the size of that you have to store and all of that, maybe it's not that big of a deal. But for some people, I know that's quite a bit of water. In the chat, I will try to get to your guys' comments as well on this. So if you guys have any, I know a lot of my viewers and listeners really know what they're talking about with this and all sorts of prepping stuff. So if you guys have any suggestions, if you guys have any questions, just leave them in the comments. But when you're thinking about water storage, I don't know. You think about how likely is an event to go on 3-6 months without water. That's a pretty, that's a disaster right there. That is probably not that likely of a situation when you think about the grand scheme of things. But a week is not all that far-fetched. Even just a few days of not having water, a couple weeks really isn't that far-fetched. So anything over a month, it gets really defined at that point as far as what could cause that. And there's a whole lot of other things going on with that as well. So I think at the very least, try to get, a couple weeks of water stored, a few weeks of water stored, because if it does get to a situation where the municipal water is contaminated, or the water outside, say the bombs do start falling and that water outside's got it's radioactive, and you're not going to be able to drink it. I've got a filter here that does a little bit for that, which I'm going to go over. But that stuff that you have stored already, that stuff is going to be separate from all of that other stuff. So that is the stuff that you really need to think about when it comes to this. But I want to go through a few of these real quick before I get into these water filters. Like I said, this article I wrote a while back, and I've got the links to all this stuff below. The first one I've got on this list is well water. And for me out here, we do have a well. For some people that don't have a well, a hand pump would work pretty well. You really need to do your research and figure out how far down your water table is. Ours is super, super deep out here. It's almost 200 feet, I think. So me getting a hand well pump is going to be a major chore. So I think what my plan is to get some sort of generator backup power that will actually start that pump. But a hand pump is, if you can, if the water table is high enough for you and you have the means to do that, that's a great way to do it. Now, I'm not so sure about if, how that water would get contaminated in the aquifer. I'm not sure how, say, radiation or chemicals or anything like that would affect it. So not sure. What's up, Kevin? Hi, White Rabbit. Our Broken Nomad in the chat for those of you who don't know what I'm talking about. But trying to dig your own well would be a good idea. Something that is, that hand pump type option. It gets you that sort of, depending on your water and the aquifer and all that, sort of an unlimited amount of water. All right, so this part right here, I've got zig when everyone else zags. And this goes into what I was talking about I did a video a few days ago about knowledge being more important than the supplies, or we can't afford to not pay attention to that. Because when everybody is going to the FEMA trucks to get their bottled water, or everybody is going to this place where the government says to go to get your water because you can't drink it, we need to be as preppers, this is what we think about all the time with this stuff. So we need to be thinking about different options. While they're going to do that, we're going to do this, because we know that situation could get kind of hairy. Now, if it's something like that just happened in Mississippi, I don't know that it would get out of hand in a few days or so. So that wouldn't be, maybe, if we had a few people here and there was a situation, some sort of natural disaster or something, maybe I'd send one family member to see if they could go get some water, scout it out, be careful, all of that stuff. And then, go the other direction as far as with other people in the family. Now, if that went on a couple weeks, maybe 2, 3, 4 weeks, I don't know, because people's frustration level really rises when they expect help from these outside sources and aren't getting it and don't know what to do. So with us, we have that ability to kind of think about this stuff beforehand, get the supplies, get the stuff we need to do, have the water storage and all that to make that situation a little bit more bearable. Now, again, that is that short term up to sort of a month type situation that we're talking about, not these large scale type situations. And we tend to, as preppers, when we think about this stuff, we tend to turn ourselves into refugees, right? We tend to think about, okay, I need a water filter. I'm in the middle of nowhere. I need to find some water. I'm in the middle of nowhere. Where do I go? And we think about streams and rivers and stuff like that. But the truth is, most of us we're either going to be trying to get home, or we're going to be at home already. So if you do have those sources around you, that's great. But think about your situation. Don't think about this hypothetical Mad Max type scenario going on. So with that, zig when everyone else zags. With this one, we need to think outside the box with all this stuff, and we need to be where everybody else isn't, basically, trying to get water. And we shouldn't, if we're doing things right, we shouldn't be in that FEMA line anyway, like misreading what River was saying. The next one I've got here, and this was a list of, I asked my group, my Apocalypse Facebook group, a while back about their ideas on this stuff. So this is kind of a compilation of their ideas and my ideas and everything. But they were talking about, in a situation like this, where you do run out of water, water heaters and pipes. Water heaters, I think ours is 40 or 50 gallons. So water heaters, you've got that reserve right there, that as long as you don't use it, it's going to still come out of the faucet for you. As long as you don't accidentally flush toilets, or keep the water running and just to do some dishes, you're going to have that. As long as you don't have a tankless water heater, that would kind of defeat the whole purpose of this. But if you do have that regular water heater, the old school water heater, I suppose, you're going to have that reserve sort of water right there while you still have pressure. So you'll have the ability, at least for a little bit, for that to come out of the faucets. When you're thinking about that too, maybe some things you will use your stored water for, and some things that you want to fill up the sink, it's going to be a whole lot easier if you can turn on the faucet, right? So think about how you're utilizing the water that you have as well. Brandon said in the chat, golf courses. Yep. I am going to go into that in a little bit. He also said, suck water out of the neighbor's sprinkler if it's not winter. Those pipes stay primed. Yeah, that's another one with the water pipes and all of that. Garden hoses. I know, and I think I've got that in the article too. I know that people talk about, these days it's taboo to drink out of a garden hose. We all did it and we're all still alive. I know there's the possibility of getting that it carries Legionnaires. That is a pretty slim possibility, and you have to get it in your lungs. So if you are drinking out of a hose, don't breathe it. Drink it in and try to keep it out of your lungs. But I'll tell you what, I've done it with just working out in the yard. So it's not going to take some sort of disaster to get me to drink out of the hose. I'm going to do it. I'll take my chances on that. But yeah, you guys are in the chat. You guys are bringing up a lot of stuff that I do have in the article. So I guess I'll move on with this. Garden hoses and sprinklers. This is what Brandon just talked about too. And then Lisa was in the chat talking about toilets too. These are both good places. We already went over the garden hoses and all that, but even toilet bowls, and I'm not talking the inside of a toilet bowl. I'm talking about the tank on the top. That's a few gallons of water. So that could be something that maybe, don't flush that toilet. There are other options if you do need to flush that toilet. So maybe, I don't know, maybe take that water out of there and then put some gray water in there, water that you're not going to use. And that kind of gets to pools and hot tubs. We've got our pond out in the backyard. I'm going to jump all around here, but we'll go through all this stuff. But we've got our small little pond outside. It's only about 400 gallons. But that is, and I've got a UV light that it filters through that water. So it's probably, if I filtered it, it would be drinkable. But that is more for like the backup for the horses. It'd be really easy to get a 5-gallon bucket, go out there and throw some water at the horses in their trough, not at them. But they drink. I think I'll have to ask. Lisa's in the chat. Is it 5 gallons of water a day per horse? Or is it more than that? I think it's more than that actually. But that's what that would be for. But if you've got swimming pools, you've got all that really treated water with chemicals and all that. I'm not so sure. Unless that water was sitting there for a little while where it had time for those chemicals to dissipate. In a situation like that, maybe you are looking at that, that longer term 3-4 week, a month type range where the sun is just beat down on that and killed off all those chemicals. But then you've got the other stuff you have to worry about. But with the filters, like we're going to talk about, maybe you can solve that problem. Me personally, like I wrote in this article, I'd probably drink from a toilet before I would drink pool water, especially a couple weeks in that time frame where there's a lot of chemicals, a lot of bromine or chlorine or whatever's in that water. A lot of chemicals go into keeping that water looking nice and clean. So. Trying to read the chats here, the comments here. I will try to get to them. A lot of good ones, but it's kind of hard to keep my train of thought and do that at the same time. But I will try to focus on those. If you do have a question, maybe a good idea would be to get all caps, and then that way it kind of sticks out to me a little bit. If you do have a question or a really good suggestion. At any rate, toilet water, and then Lisa brought up this earlier too, or Brandon brought this up actually in the chat. Golf courses and parks. And this is, I think, a situation a lot of people in the preparedness community fall into in that suburban area. So like I said in the beginning of this is not all, we're not bugging out into the middle of the woods and we're not going to just solely depend on our Sawyer water filter or Katadyn or something like that. We're going to need to be able to get that stuff out of this type of water. So in golf courses, in city parks, in places like that, those are probably going to have some chemicals in them because of them, the fertilizers, the pesticides, all that stuff to keep the grass nice and pretty and nice and clean. That is going to be in that water as well. Plus, I've seen some city parks and even golf courses where it's pretty ugly, murky water. So you are going to need a pretty heavy duty filter, or you're going to have to pre-filter that before you actually put it through your water filter. But this is a situation I could see golf courses especially, because I don't think this is that zig when everybody else zags type thing. Golf courses, a lot of people wouldn't be going to those. I don't think. Something like a reservoir. I think if there was some sort of water crisis like what happened in Mississippi, I think people would be flocking to the popular reservoirs. That would be the first thing they think about when it comes to water, and it would be a great water source. But I think that may be a little bit clogged, and if it's a real, a large scale type emergency, the access to that may even be blocked off by the city or county or whatever. So think about those other sources that you can get to. And also with this, think about your area. Brandon gave me a hard time a while back because I had drawn a blank about the rivers and the stuff in the area. He lives near me. And I drew a blank about it because I know what's in your area, basically. Maybe pull up on Google Maps. There may be spots that you know of, but if you pull up a Google map and you just kind of look around, there may be spots that you didn't even think about, and then drive around and see, how accessible a spot like that would be. How many people are around that may be using that spot, so maybe it's not a good spot at all. But all of that. Now, that being said, with all of this stuff that I'm talking about, if you have if you have the water stored in the first place, you don't have to deal with a lot of this stuff. But the longer it goes on, the more likely that you're going to run out of water. It's just impossible unless you've got a well and a way to get that water up. It's impossible to store enough water to last in a long-term type disaster. Yeah, and Broken Nomad. That's exactly what Kevin in the chat. Just stock up to begin with. Yeah, that's what I was saying. All right, swimming pools. We already talked about that. If you are in an urban area, I think you could look for local businesses. This is a dangerous situation that you probably want to stay out of. But if you are in dire straits and you need that water, even a suburban situation, you've got the strip malls and stuff like that. Or businesses that, nobody's going to work, the door's open because you don't want to, you don't want to, you want to make sure the door's open. I'll just put it that way. You make up your own mind, but there's mini fridges, there's break rooms, there's stuff like that. Just think outside of the box with this stuff where you might be able to find some water. Along with these buildings and stuff, there's piping in there too that is, like Brandon said earlier, it's primed and ready to go probably. And then streams, it's city streams. When you're up in the high country, not a big deal. We've got 400 different water filters that can get Giardia and cryptosporidium and stuff like that. It's when you're thinking about those city streams and even, to some extent, suburban streams. Hey, Brian Holland's in the chat. What's going on, Brian? But you think about what's upstream from those chemicals, pharmaceuticals, all sorts of who knows what that's in that water. Here in Denver, we've got the Platte River that runs through Denver, and it goes from Golden, which is near the mountains, and it's crystal clear up there. It's where they make Coors. Crystal clear up there. But as that goes into Denver, it's just disgusting. It's brown, it's murky. I don't know exactly what's in there, but and I know that these days there's a lot more restrictions on what people can dump into the water, but you just never know what people are doing in those streams and rivers that are in population centers. So be careful of that. Know what you're downstream from before you go for that. With that being said, though, as I talk about these filters, there are some filters that will get a lot of that stuff out. So, okay, so streams and rivers. Let me see. Rooftops and anywhere water collects is the last one I've got on here. It's not if you live in a suburban area and you've got those strip malls and stuff, it wouldn't hurt if you were in that type of situation. Again, like Kevin said, just to have water in the first place. You could find stuff that's, as long as it's, if it's winter, if it's fall, springtime, when it's raining a lot, maybe there's some collecting up there. Or maybe you can grab some buckets, put them up there to collect, and then hopefully nobody else goes and finds that. But the whole point with this section is to zig when everybody else zags. Like I said, make sure, think outside of the box. Don't just be waiting in line at that FEMA truck or the National Guard handing out water bottles. Put yourself in a position to where you don't have to do that stuff. Store that water in the first place. Like I said, I think at this point right now, I think it's really important. It's always important, but I think it's really important right now to have 30, 40 gallons, whatever you can afford, at the very least stored. that water that's not going to get contaminated from the outside. You don't have to worry about all that stuff because we never know. I'm not so sure about the whole, nukes landing on U.S. soil thing, but I'm not so sure that it can't happen either. So it's really super simple to do. It doesn't cost you much money. We'll go over some containers towards the end of the show, which you can store this stuff in, but it's really easy to do. So I highly suggest, just have that stored.